Well, I'm going to start. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this afternoon's Community Business Festival session. And it's called Everything You Need to Know About Becoming a Trustee of a Community Business. I'm Veronica Gordon, your host for this session. I'm the presenter of Power to Change's new podcast. It's called Then One Day, and it explores the moment that communities come together. Now, before I introduce our speakers, let me give you an overview of the session. It's scheduled to last for 45 minutes. This will include the panel discussion with some real community business trustees, and there will be opportunity for you to ask questions. And to ask a question, simply type it into the question and answers box at the bottom of your page, and not in the chat box, please. We are recording this session, and although you won't see her, my lovely colleague Lucy is also in the session. She's going to be controlling the tech and the presentation slides. And as I said just a little bit ago, if you want to tweet, please use the hashtag CBFestival. Now, the Community Business Festival is brought to you by Power to Change, an independent charitable trust that supports and develops community businesses across England. You can find out more about Power to Change at powertochange.org.uk. Now, in this session, we're going to be speaking to trustees from community businesses from across England and find out why they got involved, what their role entails, and to hear what it means to be a trustee and what it means to them. We'll also find out whether or not anyone can be a trustee, and the spoiler is they can. And let me introduce you to the speakers. We've got Mike Lloyd-Jones, who is a trustee at the Werburghs Community Centre. Mike, hello. And
hello.
Bonnie Hewsome from the Windmill Hill City Farm. Bonnie, hello.
Hi.
And Samuel Alibioshu from 198 Contemporary Arts and Learning. Samuel, hello.
Hello.
Hello. So over the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to hear from Mike, Bonnie and Samuel. And if there's any questions you've got for them at all, please pop them into the Q&A box. And so first up, let's hear from Mike, trustee at the Werburghs Community Centre. Mike, hello, tell us more about your role and about the Community Centre.
Thanks a lot. It's nice to be with you all today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yep. Indeed.
Great. So I'm Mike. I live in Bristol. I've lived in the city for 10 years and I've always worked in sort of social enterprise, community enterprise, sustainability projects, both paid and in voluntary roles. I worked for Bristol Pound for 4 years, Bristol's local currency, which was a startup social enterprise which launched a local currency to support local economic development through recycling money locally, building up community connections, and hopefully building a more sustainable economy. After that, I worked at Bristol Energy, a publicly owned energy company, and I currently work at Power to Change. And since 2019, in April, I joined the board of St Werburgh's Community Centre, which is my local community centre. So as the community centre's got a really amazing long history. It was founded by some of the organisers of the Commonwealth Committee. So people like Roy Hackett, who still sits on our board. You might have seen a great piece in The Guardian that featured Roy and his life fighting racism, institutionalised racism and other forms of racism in Bristol. And the community centre, the creation of the community centre was part of his project and some other key individuals. So it's an old school. It was a Victorian school and it was taken on by St Werburgh's Community Association in 1979. In 1999, we agreed a long lease with Bristol City Council and also received a grant of 1 million through the lottery to develop an annex building to the community centre to almost double our capacity. The community centre offers space. The core function that we do is a community space. So we offer out room hire for a real vast range of different people, skills, activities, from St Werburgh's, but also across wider East Bristol area, which, if you know, Bristol is a really diverse demography. And as a trustee, so we meet every 2 months. I give we look at kind of strategic issues. We review the budget every year, every 2 months. We look at our rate of room hire. We get updates on our charitable social impact projects, which tend to be grant funded things. So I think the current picture there is what we just had is the Raking and Baking project. So it's a kind of community project where people come together and volunteer, meet each other. Well, they used to until COVID hit. And until recently, the volunteers were developing our community garden, for which we've installed planters outside around the school, which we developed after feedback from the local community that said that you know, they'd like more greener space around the community centre, because we happen to be next to the M32 motorway running straight through into the heart of Bristol. So trying to green up the space, bring people together, volunteer, learn new skills like about growing and food, and then also any food that's harvested, the volunteers and team will cook all together and create a community meal together. That's an example of one of the kind of social impact projects we do. And so, yeah, as a trustee, I tend to lend my expertise where I think it's most useful. So in particular, look at stuff on kind of long-term strategy, but more recently, I've helped out on subcommittees that we've formed around HR and governance, and thinking about the structure of St Werburgh's Community Centre, how the trustees' role should be seen, and the staffing structure from below, because I think we've kind of needed a bit of an update recently. And also on kind of marketing areas, I'm a little bit of a lead on for the trustees. So yeah, that's me.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a lot. So over to Bonnie. Bonnie, can you tell us more about yourself, your role as a trustee, and the organisation that you're a trustee at?
Sure. So my name's Bonnie Hewson. I'm actually a part-time programme manager at Power to Change. And before that, I've worked for a lot of charities. I've set up a community business. I've worked on environmental stuff, food and farming and local food stuff. But basically my main skill is I'm an organised person. And I live in Bedminster in Bristol, which is south of the river in Bristol. So it's sort of quite a lot of its own community just on the edge of Bristol. And it's quite a mixed community. It's got a lot of gentrification going on, which I feel like I'm maybe a little bit of. My daughter goes to the nursery at Windmill Hill City Farm, and I've spent so much time down there while she's in nursery trying to do my work from the cafe, that I thought, well, this is the place that I spend almost as much time as I spend at home. I feel really at home there, and it's been such a sanctuary for me while I've been learning how to be a mum, a long time working, you know, that I thought I'd like to get more involved. I wasn't really sure how. I've never been on a board before, but I thought the least I could do was become a member. And obviously working for Power to Change, I'm really aware of how important it is for people in local communities to be part of the organisations that they care about and that contribute to their lives. So I wanted to be part of it more. So I became a member, and through that I started hearing a bit more about what else I could do. So they do a lot of volunteering, and then I saw that they were advertising for several new members of their board. And they were saying we want these to be diverse members of the community, and I had like a big kind of like worry that maybe I wasn't like, you know, diverse enough to be on the board. But when I went to talk to them, they were very welcoming and said, we need lots of different perspectives. We need more parents of people whose children are at the nursery at the farm, because although parents have to become members, a lot of them aren't involved in the democratic bit. And so they encouraged me to get involved, and I stood at the AGM, and that was last December. So I'm quite a new board member. I'm not part of any of the subcommittees, but there's like a finance subcommittee and things like that. But there's a huge number of things that go on at the farm. So there's loads of different ways of kind of getting involved and learning about it. So it was set up in the 70s, one of the first city farms outside of London. And it used to be an old lorry park, and the community took it on and turned it into a community farm. And it was set up with the purpose of providing sort of recreational facilities and support to the community in whatever way was needed. So they have a cafe and a nursery there, and they rent out room spaces to businesses. Like there's a little pottery and a craft shop, and that's the business side of it. But they also have all of the animals. They have allotment gardens. They do loads of health and social care. They take people from school visits and, you know, people with different educational needs and health and social care needs. So it's like it's a really diverse setting. And I thought, I'm joining the board of a place that's on a really even keel where I can learn a lot. So one of my reasons to get involved was I wanted to know what it was like to be on a board, especially of something that I cared about and wanted to support, and that I would learn loads. And then COVID hit. And so now I'm really learning what it means to be responsible for an organisation that may not always be smooth sailing. So I'm getting a crash course in being responsible for the strategic direction of an organisation and how it meets its charitable purposes whilst it has to adapt its business model. So obviously the management and the strategy are to do with like the staff, but the board has oversight of whether or not it's doing it in the right way and continuing to serve its community. And so it's been a huge learning curve and really fascinating. So that's where we're at the moment.
That's wonderful. When you say it's been a huge learning curve, what are the types of skills that you took to the organisation?
So I guess, one of the things I bring is that I do work for a grant funder, and I have worked previously as someone who raises funds for organisations. So I've got a bit of insight into that aspect of what they have to do as both a charity and a grantee. And I have an eye on like what's available. So I feel like I can channel my connections about what funding might be appropriate there. But obviously it doesn't give them any advantage in applying for funds. Also because I've set up community businesses, I felt like maybe I had like a bit of intelligence around that, and also working on local food and farming, I felt I had good connections in Bristol around that. But to be honest, those are things that I felt other people on the board could probably offer too. So one of my main reasons for getting involved was because I was local and because I use it. I use its services. I use its cafe all the time. I use its nursery all the time. I love the fact that it's there. It's the green space that I go to most. And I think without it, so many people would be lost at sea in Bedminster. And I just really loved the way that they made everyone feel welcome. So I wanted to be part of like how it thrived. So I didn't know, like I wasn't sure that I was bringing enough, but it felt like what I really brought was that I cared about it.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And over to you, Samuel. Can you tell us more about your role at 198 Contemporary Arts, and also tell us about the organisation?
Hello. So yeah, everyone, nice to meet you. My name's Samuel. So I'm a trustee at 198 Contemporary Arts and Learning. And 198 is a space which does three things. They do space for emerging artists, creative courses for young people not in education. And then they have a social arm which I set up with other young people back here over 10 years ago. So back in 2009. 198 started out of the Brixton riots in 1988. So it was started by a guy called Noel and Zoe Thompson. So yeah, basically that's a bit of history about the organization. So it's a 30-year history, and I've been a board member there for about 4 years. So essentially set up the social enterprise with other young people back in 2009, as I mentioned. But prior to that, I was attending courses with young people in education. So we would learn courses in our spare time around Photoshop, illustration, and certain graphic software. So it was off the basis of me learning that in my spare time. I got involved in exhibitions and different things that were happening at the gallery space. So within a gap year of my university, we set up the social enterprise, and essentially we took over a shop front as a pop-up in Brixton Village back in 2010. So we collaborated with Central St. Martin's to deliver that, and that enabled me to now go on to do my degree. So whilst I was doing my degree, I was also helping out with the social enterprise and developing it. So we spent about 6 years before we migrated back into the gallery space where we started from. And essentially, yeah, we've been there, just obviously developing our services. So we developed our model into a factory model, which was a collaboration project with 14 other organizations in the local community. And essentially, it was about actually enabling young people to gain access to support to build sustainable businesses. So they'll be able to gain access to mentorship and support. So essentially, we realized after piloting it that it was quite successful. And we decided that we were going to develop our space 2 floors up to essentially house this project, as well as have a co-working space and extended community space for the local area. So 198 has always been a place where, you know, people from disadvantaged backgrounds have the opportunity to exhibit work, as you saw. And then also we do a lot of work with young people in that sense, in terms of providing courses that enable them to have something to do in their spare time. And then we have the social arm that gives them a trade and skill that they can learn, because essentially we offer garment printing services and clothing. So with the factory model, the idea is that we're building upon the blocks we already have. So the idea is that as a young person, they'll be able to go through the different aspects of the organization. So when they get involved in the social enterprise, they'll be able to go into the factory model and then obviously develop sustainable business off the back of that. And if they need access to co-working space or office space or exhibition space or an event space, we'll be able to offer that. So it's a multi-purpose space that we're developing, and the aim is to have that completed by 2021.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned you were a young person as part of the organisation before you became a trustee. How did you make that leap from being one of the young people there to being on the board?
I naturally just got involved with the organisation because I loved the work that they were doing. So a friend initially recommended the organisation to me, and that's how I found out about it. So when I got involved, I just loved the fact that obviously it gave me an opportunity to really learn a skill and something to do in my spare time. So after getting involved, I just became part of the furniture, to be honest with you. They couldn't get rid of me. So I was always there in my spare time, always helping out with activities. And then obviously once we set up the social enterprise, that gave me room to really grow something. So obviously as a result of how active I was in the enterprise and the fact that, you know, I would be the person who would speak about, you know, 198, the social enterprise. So I would essentially be the face of the brand, as well as help develop it. Essentially, yeah, it just made sense for me to get involved because I knew the organization in different aspects. I knew it as a young person, I knew it as an employer, and I knew it as someone who obviously was active in the organization. So it just made sense for me to be a trustee because I was able to offer a valuable perspective.
That's fantastic. And I'm just going to remind everyone who's watching, you can put your questions in the Q&A box and send questions for any of today's speakers. So I'm going to throw this one to Michael. Michael, for all of the organisations, you all do so many things. How do you manage to put your work time around time with being a trustee?
It can be tricky. It depends really on your situation. I think for me at St. Werburgh's, we have quite an established staff team with salaried director. We have a director. We have almost a second level of management, a deputy director almost, who looks after our HR and finance, and then we have kind of set management levels below that. So generally, we are able as trustees to focus on discussion and decisions around the kind of strategic stuff, the kind of big decisions. And the idea, I think, for us in particular is not to get involved in the day-to-day nitty-gritty running of the organisation, and really delegate that to our director and to the rest of the management team. I say management team, you know, we're not huge. There's 3 managers effectively, including our director. And it's about not getting involved in the operational side, but thinking about the really strategic stuff. So one of the things that that trustees tend to focus on is at the core is like a risk register for the organisation, which gives you a list of all your kind of key risks and how you're addressing them. And it's something that as trustees you generally review regularly, so that you have you know, you're planning for the worst and you understand what the key threats are to the organisation and the mitigation, the things you're doing to prevent that. And that should be a good way of steering you away from like what type of light bulbs we have or this. Although if it's a big purchase, if it's like, I have actually been on a board where we've talked about, but you know, redoing all of the light bulbs in the whole centre, and you've got to do a big cost benefit analysis, then it kind of goes to trustees. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Bonnie, how about you? How do you manage your commitments and work around being a trustee?
So when I first joined, I was told there'd be quarterly board meetings. and that would be the majority of the kind of involvement. And they are always in the evening, 7:30 in the evening. Now they're online, which makes it super easy. But actually there's also a twilight meeting that we have with the staff and the board members, and sometimes we have other staff board meetings. There's the AGM that happens once a year as well. And there's also subcommittees that you can be part of. But I also know now that there's a lot of email conversation that happens in between those meetings, especially when there's something, you know, quite nitty gritty to work out. And so probably the majority of my inbox now is like emails about the farm. But you don't have to like respond to all of them or, you know, engage with everything, because there's a lot of people on the board and you're not the only one. So you can engage when you can, and then if you've got other stuff going on, you don't have to. And then you read the papers before the board meeting, and then you turn up at the board meeting and you discuss it. And like that is the basic thing that you have to do, but you can get involved more or less depending on your time. And obviously the more you get involved, the more useful you are and the more you learn. So I would say, like, I agree with Mike, there's a difference between like the day-to-day management and what the board's role is. But we tend to look at the finances every quarter, and that's really interesting because there's a lot of different moving parts on the farm, and it's quite difficult making a business model work around a farm. So there's a lot to like learn there, but also there's like bigger pieces of stuff going on about whether or not the farm should acquire other assets in Bristol. There's big developments happening right on the edge of the farm with developers who we're trying to persuade to put more community space into their developments and to like make sure the development suits the area. So there's a lot of influencing and advocacy actually role that the farm has. So you can get involved in those meetings too. There's stuff about climate change and the role of farming and agriculture and education, and our role in like how we adapt as an organization to climate change. You know, all of the stuff around Black Lives Matters and making sure that we're really engaging with our community in the right ways, the different parts of the community. The stuff around the nursery, which you'd think would be like a nice earner, but actually the government, you know, it pays you £4.92 an hour for something that actually costs £7 an hour. So how do you make all of that work, especially in the middle of COVID when they keep changing the rules? So there's actually quite a lot of like different things that you can educate yourself on. And once a year, or actually like it's probably slightly longer, but this year we've reviewed the strategy. So the strategy gets reviewed, and that is something that the board does with the staff team. And so you all look together at how the different parts of the organisation work to fulfil the charitable objectives and what needs to shift and change. But the day-to-day management of all the staff issues and like actually the costing of the budgets and like how the site works and how people move around it during COVID, it's not the board's problem, but we do oversee some of those things to make sure that if something happened and the farm was culpable, that the board had seen it and was supporting the CEO in those decisions. So yeah, it's like almost anything, but not everything if you don't want to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Samuel, over to you. How did you manage to juggle your commitments around being a trustee?
I think because of the nature, obviously, of the organization and the fact that we're now in a place where we're developing, it frees up my time because we don't necessarily have to meet as much as possible. We don't have a physical space to meet anymore. Essentially, we hire out a space in Brixton during the time period temporarily to kind of, you know, run the projects and the different things that are ongoing. But to kind of echo what the other two said, you know, as a board member, you're offering strategic direction. So, you know, our meetings are set throughout the year. So there will be particular days that I just have to ensure that I'm available to be kept up to date with what's happening, where the funding is coming from. But the focus is just mainly being on drawing in enough funding to be able to ensure that we complete the project that we started, the development process. So we managed to raise about 1.3 million to deliver it. And that's come from different funders. So it's just kind of overseeing that whole process and ensuring that things are ticking over and getting done. And obviously due to COVID, that affected a lot of things. So in terms of the initial time frame that we had in place had to be extended. You know, we were hoping to have the building completed by this year, but due to COVID and everything that's happening, we've had to extend it to 2021. So just, yeah, in terms of that strategic direction, because there's set dates and there's a structure to it, it enables me to be able to do multiple things as well.
That's fantastic. I'm going to take a question from somebody now, and I'll throw it at you, Samuel, before asking the others. As a trustee, what is the biggest challenge you and the organisation has faced?
As a trustee, I think there's been multiple challenges. I don't think there's just been one challenge, to be honest with you. I think I remember there was one challenge particularly where we couldn't release, or no, we couldn't have the amount of funding we needed to pay our staff. So there was a period where we had to ensure that we started dipping into our reserves to be able to pay the staff and things like that. There's been times where, for instance, you know, a funder pulled out and then it left us in our crisis situation, and we had to kind of seek ways to cut back. So that meant actually like letting people go or reducing their days in order for us to be able to cover the footfall. You know, so there's been multiple crises that have occurred. And I think during those periods, it's been really interesting because some of the board members have even had to step in and say, you know what, in order to cover the footfall, I'm prepared to loan money to the organization. You know, so it's challenging, you know, and there are some challenges that can arise. But yeah, we have good people in place, and everyone that's on board believes in the vision, so where they're willing to do what it takes to make it succeed.
Gosh, that's incredible to hear that passion of the other board members. And over to Bonnie. Bonnie, what challenges has your organisation faced, and how have you coped as trustees?
Well, I've only been there since December, so I'm sure they've had other challenges before my time. I know, you know, previously in years past, one of the challenges was obviously it's the board's job to recruit a CEO. So, you know, the CEO manages everyone else, but the board helps to recruit the CEO. So we actually have a great CEO in place at the moment. So I haven't had to be involved in that, but I imagine that must be quite a challenge. I think there's like the two conflicting things, I suppose, is like how to make a business work that has multiple strands, all of which are challenging. Like a cafe can be challenging, a farm itself is very challenging, health and social care has like challenges, childcare has challenges, and so how you address all of those to make the whole add up to something that's secure. And originally the thought was you've got to earn as much of your income as possible, so you're less reliant on grants. And then COVID comes along and goes smash. Actually, if you've got more grants, you're possibly more secure than if you're earning more money. So, you know, navigating that has been a huge challenge for the CEO, and anything that's a challenge for the CEO is a challenge for the board, because they have to support the CEO in making it through that, and, you know, supporting whatever it is that needs to be done. So to me, like, that has been fascinating, scary, interesting, and yeah, has just really built my respect for the people who are actually tackling the problems internally in the organisation.
That's wonderful. And over to you, Mike. As a trustee, what is the biggest challenge that you and the organisation has faced?
Sorry, got my mute button stuck. So the current crisis is pretty unprecedented for the centre. About sort of 80% of our income is through room hire, which is pretty good going generally for in terms of traded income in community business world. And obviously COVID means we can't really have the kind of basis of our business model is people meeting in indoors. So that's a big challenge, and working out what we're going to do next is particularly hard, given that we have constraints around staff capacity. So we furloughed a lot of our staff, and then the people that we kept on were left with a huge amount of work to do from March until July. Had a bit of a break, a low month, and then we're going to get back to it, I think, towards the end of this month, thinking about the different scenarios that might come, maybe planning out 3 different scenarios and work out how we'd respond to them. You know, a very high spike in COVID, or moderate, or no spike at all, and we'll just have to see. I think you've got to sort of hope for the best, plan for the worst in these kind of situations. So current crisis plus capacity is a big challenge we're facing at the moment.
Okay, and another question has come in, and either of you can answer this one. So each of the organisations sounds well developed. So that's great. Quite large in size and with many varied people on board. do any of you have any experience of a very small, newish community business boards and the extra challenges that might throw up for trustees?
I have a little bit of experience of that.
Yeah.
It is a totally different kettle of fish, like being able to go into something that's already established and go, I'm just bringing this little piece of the puzzle, and then like feeding off the intelligence and experience of all of the other people. When you're setting something up, or you're one of the first members of a board, there's a lot more pressure on you to get all of the structures right at the beginning. So I was involved in setting up a community benefit society, and that tends to have like a membership, but you can delay like having a wider membership. So it just started off with a few board members making the decisions, so 3 or 4, and that puts a lot more burden on everybody, as well as them often having to do quite a lot of the work, as well as making the, you know, strategic decisions, and then trying to find people who want to be part of what you're doing that have a different skill set. So obviously as a small organisation, you don't have the resources to go out to an executive recruitment company to find you the right board members, but there are resources around that you can look at. So for instance, there's an organisation called Women on Boards, and they provide a lot of support for women joining boards, and they have some free resources, including like how to recruit more diversity onto boards and things like that. And so you can learn a lot more about like how you go about working out what skills you need, and then co-opting people onto your board. So you can have a number of elected members and then a number of co-opted members who have specific skills that you might need at that point in the organization's development, like legal skills or marketing skills, and that's useful to be able to do. So then it's about like using your networks to try and find people.
It's really nice. Oh, sorry, Samuel, go ahead.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's important to start with your network. It's funny because I'm also a trustee to another organization, and they've been around for not as long as 198, but obviously they went through like a transition. So they were part of another organization and they migrated out of that organization, and it required them to now have a new board. And the CEO must have just reached out to me and was like, well, he wants me to now obviously come on board as a trustee, because he knows that I'm an entrepreneur. He knows I've set up various companies in the past. But around that stage and around that period, he kind of looked to his immediate network. Then he asked if I knew people, and do you know what I mean? So it's important that you start with your existing network and build upon that. You know, LinkedIn is a great tool as well to find people that potentially could join your board. And there's other organizations as well, like Inclusive Boards, that do stuff around, you know, board members and providing tools and resources for board members, or just kind of free information. So yeah, there's multiple organizations and networks that you can tap into.
That's a really good point. Looking at your existing networks, that's very, very crucial. So how do you manage the overall skills of the Board of Trustees? That's a question that's came in.
Is that to me?
Anyone who wants to answer this one, how do you manage the overall skills of the Board of Trustees?
Well, I could give it one a go. We did a little bit of work on this at where I was when I joined. So one thing we did was run a skills audit of people on the board, and what that is, if for the audience who haven't done one before, you put together a list of kind of core skills like legal, finance, HR, maybe engineering, anything that any kind of a core skills that might relate to your organization or broader, and then you share that list around each of your trustees and ask them to rate personally kind of the extent of their knowledge in those areas, and then that way you can map you know where you have trustees that feel as though they're very confident in particular areas, and identify the areas where you're not that well covered, and then you can evaluate as a board whether you think that means you need to recruit some more people in specific areas. So classic areas that I probably always want to have on a trustee board are like legal, financial, and ideally some kind of HR experience, maybe direct experience, you know, someone who is an actual HR manager, or someone who is in a senior management position with oversight of HR, because those are kind of some of the key areas of risk in particular for any organization. So I think that's a great way to do it, is to create a skills audit, share it around as a survey, and then you can reflect on that and make decisions from there.
Fantastic. And for all of you, a question that's come in: what have you personally gained from being a trustee, like skills, friendships, etc.? I'll throw that to Bonnie. What have you personally gained?
I mean, again, I've only had 6 months, but I already feel like I've gained a huge amount of nuanced perspective on some of these like really gritty issues, because I'm probably quite an idealist, and I probably always think there's a positive solution to any problem, but some of these problems that organizations have are really wicked problems, and they don't have like a straightforward answer. And sometimes you have to compromise on some things that you might want to do, like having more people working in a cafe that are volunteers who are there for social care reasons, versus whether or not the cafe is profitable, whether you're going to serve organic bacon, or whether the overheads are too high and you're going to go vegetarian. You know, it's like these are little questions that are operational, but it's all about like, how do you make something work without compromising your principles or what you want to do, and also who in your community are you serving when the community is shifting and changing and all these developments are coming, and there's loads of students and there's loads of rich people from London buying houses, and there's loads of people who've been there for generations who aren't engaging in the same way, and they're not using the services in the same way. So how do you stay relevant to everyone? And there's no easy answer to that. So I think what I've learned is, you know, the complexity is good, and you don't have to have like an easy answer. And I've learned a huge amount from all the people who've been on the board, who share quite detailed emails about what they think and resources that they can share, and like they have differences of opinions, but everyone listens respectfully and values that, and we kind of come to an agreement, or trust the CEO to like find the way through. So I've learned how a functional board can work well, and I hope to keep learning that and hope that it remains functional.
We're coming shortly towards the end of the session. Can I ask you all what tips you would give to people who are considering becoming a trustee? Samuel, I'll start with you.
What tips?
Yeah.
I would say know what you bring to the table. I think it's very important that you know your skills, you know what you're strong at, even what you're weak at, you know what I mean, and what areas that you need to grow and develop in, because the good thing about being on a board is that you can be challenged in so many areas that you didn't necessarily think you'd be challenged in. So I would say definitely know yourself and know what you bring to the table and know the skills that you can offer.
That's brilliant. Mike, how about you?
I think the first one I'd say is don't be afraid to get involved. You know, look for opportunities, because I think we need more people to be trustees of organizations. It's a really important role. It's not, you know, you're not there every day. You're not someone you don't work for the organization generally, and like we talked about startup organizations, sometimes that can be the case when you're just starting out. It's just the trustees until you get some volunteers and then you get someone hired or something like that. But in more established organizations where you've got trustees operating as a functioning board, you're not there in the day-to-day, and it can seem a bit of a weird role, but it's a really vital role to kind of oversee at a strategic level all the kind of big picture stuff that keeps the organization going, and also how you think about what's next for the organization, how it's going to continue to survive and hopefully thrive and do more of the good stuff that it's already doing, or meeting new emerging needs that are coming up in the local community. So get involved, get stuck in. I think just focus on the strategic big picture would be my kind of overall advice for anyone who's a trustee. Like, try and get a risk register together. Don't worry about the kind of nitty-gritty stuff too much, and try and take a step back when you're getting, you know, your reports and feedback and where you're walking around the space. Think about those kind of big threats and big opportunities, and focus on them in your interactions with your other board members and the staff.
Bonnie, what advice would you give to, you're a new trustee, what advice would you give to someone who's kind of thinking about it?
I would say there's always going to be that sense of imposter syndrome that we all carry with us in everything that we do. You just got to kind of get over it. If you've got some skills, like you're good at finance and HR, they're going to bite your hand off anyway. And if you don't, it doesn't matter, because actually what really matters is that you care about the organisation or the community that it's operating in, and that you feel like you want to have a say in making sure that it works for everyone. So your voice is only ever going to be one voice on the board. So you're not fully responsible for everything. You're not financially responsible for the organisation, but you are somewhat responsible for the direction it takes. And if you care about that organisation and the direction it takes, then that's a reason enough to get involved. And there's no such thing as a stupid question on a board. Like, feel free to ask anything, because everyone knows that you don't have all the historic knowledge, and feel free to challenge, because it's okay for everyone not to agree. So I think, you know, just trying to take part is enough to begin with, and then you'll learn a huge amount, and you'll start to learn what you have to bring that other people don't have, because it's not always about your experience and background and skills. Sometimes it's about your perspective and your voice and your experience in that community.
Fantastic. Right, I'm going to really put you all on the spot now. In one sentence, each of you, what are you most proud of about your time as a trustee? Samuel, over to you. What are you most...
What am I most proud of in one sentence? Having the opportunity to make sustainable change.
Perfect. Perfect. Mike, over to you. What are you most proud of being a trustee? Oh, you're on mic. You're on mute. Unmute.
Great, gave me a little bit of extra time to think there. So building for the future with new capital projects.
Brilliant. Bonnie, over to you. One sentence. What are you most proud of about being a trustee?
I think so far I'm most proud of fighting the case for why it's really important that the farm engages more with its members and encourages more members to show up to have an opinion at things like the AGM.
Thank you all so much. We are at the end of today's session. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk to us. And thank you to everyone who's joined us for this session. It will be available to watch again on Power to Change's social media and website. Community businesses will welcome and would really benefit from all of your skills. If you're thinking about becoming a trustee, just do it. There are some steps you can take. If you head to Power to Change's website, there's a community business map. You can go on there and you can search for community businesses near you. And the website is powertochange.org.uk. Also on that website, you can search by sector as well, so you can really find a community business in something you're really interested in. There's also a website called howcharitieswork.com, and that links to a database of a few websites that advertise trustee jobs. So that's howcharitieswork.com. And if you're interested in other volunteering roles, do sign up for our Helping Hand volunteering session at the Business Festival, which will be tomorrow at 2:30. And before we go, if you'd like to hear more first-hand stories about how trustees and volunteers are helping to change their communities for the better, do listen and subscribe to Power to Change's new podcast. It's called Then One Day, and you can find it on your phone's podcast app. Thank you again so much for joining today's session, and enjoy the rest of the Community Business Festival. And we may see some of you again tomorrow. Mike, Bonnie and Samuel, thank you very much for being with us.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.